Zaina had always been a woman of strength, grace, and ambition. She was a dance instructor, teaching in a bustling city far from her birthplace in New York. Years ago, she had left behind her family, friends, and everything familiar to seek a new life in the Arab world, where she believed she could rebuild herself, new opportunities, new challenges, and most importantly, a chance to rediscover who she really was. She wasn't just a dancer. She was a woman in search of more. Zaina wanted freedom from the expectations that bound her, from the emotional void that had quietly formed over the years. On the surface, Zaina seemed to have it all. She was married to Hazen, a wealthy and influential businessman. Their life together was filled with luxury, an elegant apartment in the heart of the city, fine dining, and extravagant vacations. Hazen was a man of respect in their community, revered for his accomplishments and status. Zaina had everything a woman could want, but it wasn't enough. Her marriage had once been full of passion and promise. But as time passed, Hazen's work increasingly consumed him. Late nights at the office, endless meetings, and social obligations left little room for Zaina. She began to feel invisible, unimportant, and ultimately alone. She had tried to fill the emptiness by focusing on her dance studio, but it wasn't enough. The vibrant, joyous energy she once felt when she danced began to fade as well. She was stuck in a world that didn't fully understand her. Then, one evening, Adam walked into her life. A new student at the studio. He was immediately striking a tall, dark-haired businessman with a magnetic presence. His eyes were deep and intense, and his smile seemed to be both an invitation and a challenge. He watched her as she taught, his attention never straying from her movements. Zaina was used to being admired for her talent, but this was different. There was something more, there's something unspoken, yet undeniable. Adam was captivated by her. He found her not just beautiful, but fierce, independent, and unafraid. He admired how her confidence shone through every step she took. The attraction was instant. The chemistry between them was undeniable. At first, it was innocent small conversations after class, compliments on her teaching, and the occasional laugh shared. But as the days passed, their interactions grew more intense. Zaina caught herself thinking about him during her classes. In the quiet moments when she was alone, she wondered what it would be like to be with someone who saw her, really saw her, to be desired in a way she hadn't felt in years. One evening, after a particularly challenging lesson, he hadn't
Adam
noticed,
stayed behind
but
to
Adam
help
had.
Zaina clean
His
up the
gaze lingered
studio.
on her
As she
a
wiped
silent
down the
understanding
mirrors,
passing
he
between
moved
them.
closer,
There was an
offering
undeniable
to help
pull.
with the heavy
Zaina
chairs.
wasn't sure when it
His
happened.
touch was
but
casual
one
at
evening,
first,
after a
just
private
brushing
lesson,
against
Adam
her arm,
invited her to
but it
dinner.
sent a shock
She
through her
hesitated
body.
at first.
Her heart
she
raced,
was married,
and she
after
quickly
all,
looked away.
and she had never considered herself someone who would cheat. But Hazen had been absent for so long, emotionally and physically, that the thought of being with someone who truly saw her felt both tempting and dangerous. It was a night of indecision and desire, but she finally accepted. The dinner was nothing like she expected. Adam was attentive and kind, showing a depth that made Zaina feel cherished. As they shared stories and laughed, she felt the connection between them deepen. She hadn't felt this alive in years. Adam listened intently to her, his focus never wavering. There was a fire in him that matched the hunger she'd been suppressing. She was no longer just Zaina, the wife of a successful businessman. She was a woman in her own right, with her own desires, her own passions. As the evening ended, Adam walked her back to her apartment. Standing at the door, He looked at her with a mixture of longing and respect. Without saying a word, he leaned in and kissed her softly at first, but then with increasing intensity. The kiss was an explosion, a release of everything Zaina had been holding back. She knew she shouldn't, but in that moment, she couldn't resist. That night, Zaina found herself torn between guilt and desire. She had never imagined herself in this situation, but Adam's touch had awakened something inside her that had been dormant for far too long. She couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he made her feel alive, desired, free. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Zaina tried to keep her emotions in check, focusing on her work and her responsibilities as a wife. But Hazen was distant, consumed by his work, and their relationship had grown increasingly strained. When he was home, he was distracted, barely noticing the changes in Zaina. Meanwhile, Adam's presence in her life intensified. They shared secret meetings, moments of passion that only added fuel to the fire. Zaina felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Adam made her feel powerful, desirable, and free, everything Hazen no longer did. One day, Hazen announced he would be going away on business for a few days. Zaina saw this as a perfect opportunity to spend time with Adam. That evening, they met at a luxurious hotel. The room was dimly lit, the city lights twinkling outside the window. As soon as the door closed behind them, the tension was palpable. Adam wasted no time. His lips found hers, and this time, there was no hesitation. Their passion was wild, urgent, and all-consuming. Zaina gave herself completely to him, lost in the pleasure he provided, in the freedom to explore a side of herself she had buried for too long. Afterward, as they lay together, Zaina felt a strange sense of peace. She had crossed a line, but in that moment, she didn't regret it. The next morning, however, reality set in. She knew she had to face the consequences of her actions, but she didn't yet understand how deep the consequences would go. Days later, Hazen returned home. Zaina went through the motions of being the dutiful wife, but the guilt weighed heavily on her. She had changed, and so had her marriage. The connection she once shared with Hazen felt distant, almost foreign. She could no longer ignore the fact that she had betrayed him not just physically, but emotionally. Adam had awakened a part of her that she couldn't turn off, no matter how hard she tried. One evening, Hazen planned a romantic dinner for them at home. Zaina was conflicted. She wanted to feel the love they once shared, but the desire she had for Adam lingered in her mind. During dinner, she found herself distracted, lost in thoughts of Adam's touch, his voice, his gaze. Hazen, noticing her lack of attention, finally confronted her. "What's going on, Zaina? You've been distant lately," he asked, his tone more concerned than angry. Zaina's heart raced. She knew she couldn't lie anymore, but she also knew she wasn't ready to face the truth. She forced a smile and shook her head. "It's nothing, just work stress. I'm fine." But deep inside, she knew she wasn't fine. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. Her marriage, her identity, her desires, all of them had changed, and she had to find a way to navigate the new reality she had created for herself. Zaina's internal conflict intensified. She was torn between two worlds, one where she was a wife, loyal and devoted to her husband, and another where she was free to explore her deepest desires with Adam. She knew she couldn't keep living this double life forever, but she didn't know how to let go of either one. The passion she had found with Adam was intoxicating, but Zaina knew that sooner or later, the truth would come out. The guilt was eating away at her, but so was the longing. She had discovered a side of herself she couldn't ignore, and it had changed everything. Zaina realized that she was standing at a crossroads. The choices she made now would determine not only her future, but the future of her marriage. Could she continue living this lie, Or would she have to confront the consequences of her actions head on?